Bonjour, everybody. Good evening. Very warm welcome to all of you for the AI Ahead of Us event. Some of you might remember the machine learning in the real world workshop that we did sometime in June when we announced the creation of the AI lab. And Dan, our CTO, said, hey, stay tuned for an even more exciting event, which is catered a lot more to the ML community in France overall, and that is this particular event. I'm sure most of you are here to hear, you possibly clicked on RSVP as soon as you saw Michael Jordan on the schedule and all of our distinguished panelists. But that being said, I would like to set a little bit of context about what is Criteo, what do we do here, why are we interested in machine learning overall, okay? So a little bit for those of you who are not familiar with us. So Criteo was founded in 2005, and we've grown tremendously in the past few years. Today, we are able to connect 1.4 billion shoppers to the products that they love. And we do this via advertising. And we believe that our mission is to provide advertising so that we are able to keep the internet open for all. Now, for this ecosystem to actually work, we need to be able to show ads that make sense to the users. We need to make sure that our advertisers are getting something for the money that they are spending, meaning that the users are not just clicking on ads, but they are actually purchasing and engaging with the sites. And overall, for our publishers to be able to monetize their content as well, right? So while this sounds pretty good on paper, what does it look like? And I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, and you're like, oh no, here is another screenshot where maybe this is what you would like to see. We would want to change this view. But imagine that there are two ad slots that need to be shown on the Washington Post. Now the question is, what do we put in there, right? So at a very, very high level, what happens out here is that a user shows up on a particular device, on what we call a publisher, in this context, the Washington Post, and an exchange happens. This is very much like an auction mechanism where a call gets put out to a whole bunch of, say, demand-side platforms to say, hey, who would like to have the opportunity to show an ad out here? So you can imagine that a lot of people bid on this space, including Criteo and a few of the other big names as well. Now, the problem that most of you are most likely familiar with is how do we predict the expected value of that slot? How do we make the CTR prediction or the conversion rate prediction for that particular slot? Now, this problem has been written about in great detail, and if you look at most of the literature which comes out from the computational advertising space, it tends to focus on this piece. Now, Criteo has made quite a few interesting investments along these lines in terms of maybe we want to model this as a sequential problem, because you can assume that the user is on a particular journey interacting with a whole bunch of products along the way, and now we have an opportunity to show an ad. So how would we want to model this so that it is not an IID event, but it actually has some amount of dependence on the events before? Now, once that's done, most of us would like to believe that the world runs on second price auction. This is what theory tells us is the best way to run a particular auction. But believe it or not, there are quite a few incentives for publishers to not have such a truthful auction and in fact move away from a second price auction. And a survey that was done by an external provider called Get Intent in 2018 showed that the number of publishers who are running an actual second price auction went from 70% to 30% just this year, right? So now what does this mean for somebody in this space? Is it enough for you to bid your truthful value and be expected to win that auction, or do you have to do something more so you're able to increase the probability of your win rate, right? So how do you even model the mechanisms in play here via the data that we have? So that's another interesting problem that we talk about. There is a famous quote by somebody, I forget the name now, who said that I kind of know that half of advertising works, but I don't know which half, right? So that pretty much holds true because we are exposed to products in many, many, many different forums, right? It's not just the ads that you see online. It's what you talk to your friends about. Maybe you see a billboard. Maybe you're browsing something in a shop. So when you click on a particular ad and you end up making that purchase, how much credit do we actually give to that particular ad impression? Maybe it just triggered something, but you had already made up your mind to buy that particular product. So this is what what we call an attribution problem, and closely related to it is what we call incrementality, in the sense that you're not just visiting the publisher to buy, the advertiser to buy just that one thing, but you're incentivizing the user to spend something more or to purchase something else that they hadn't thought about. Right? So how do we model this and make sure that we're giving the right credit to the ads? You can imagine it in this way. If this is a machine learning problem and we thought that every time we showed an ad and a click resulted in it, that was the cause of the purchase, it could be a very falsely set up problem, because it's most likely not just that ad, but a sequence of events that happened prior to that. So how do we deal with attribution? And finally, this is something all of you could relate to. We do not want to be the advertising platform that facilitates the illegal bots to win, or to have the fake news site of the world make money. Right? This is not what is going to sustain this business. So how can we as Criteo weed out these sorts of malicious content in users is another interesting challenge. Okay? Now, I would like to inspire the scale of all of these things. So if you look at the number of comments that Facebook gets in a day, it's 166 million, right? So the number of tweets from Twitter, 500 million. Google is about 3.5 billion searches a day. What I'd like to stress here is the number of display requests that Criteo fields in any given day is 200 billion, right? In a day, we get that many requests to show a particular ad. Now, obviously, we are not going to bid on everything. We are going to discard a whole bunch. But this is literally a machine learning model. In fact, several machine learning models that are running in the background to make that scale of a decision, right? Of which we would possibly want to bid and win close to 3.5 billion banners. And it's not just enough to have won the auction. Now we need to personalize it. Now, what makes this even more challenging is the time that we take to run that particular auction has to be less than 10 milliseconds. Okay? So the latency matters as well. So once we have won that particular slot, now the question is, what is the product we want to show? And this becomes another interesting problem in recommendation systems. So of the 3.5 billion banners, we have the possibility to show 4.5 billion products. Right? This is the size of our active catalogs across all of our retailers. And these retailers are coming from 18,000 different advertisers across 98 different countries. So there is questions of what language, what is the locality that we are trying to target, and so on and so forth. And what makes this problem also challenging is we have about 100 milliseconds to figure out what's the right product to show. Right? So the scale sort of permeates everything that we do. And hopefully at the end of the day, you have a beautiful ad experience, one that you are happy with and not something that you get annoyed with. Okay? A truly personalized ad experience, which is a win-win for the user, the publisher, as well as the advertiser. Okay, so hopefully I gave you a little bit of a taste for why machine learning at scale matters for Criteo. The whole point is that we want to motivate people to think about challenging machine learning problems inspired by the world of online advertising. Okay? And that was the reason the Criteo research team was established way back in 2016. Quite proud of some of these statistics. We grew from a team of 8 to 35. We opened our lab in 3 different locations, in Paris, in Grenoble, as well as Palo Alto. In the space of the few years that we have started, we've managed to publish 23 papers, and somebody in the research team has managed to facilitate, meaning a person in the research team was personally responsible for chairing one of the 9 workshops in the top international conferences. And what's even better is we have won 3 awards till date at KDD and Wisdom, and lastly at Rexis. Now, I would like to share a little anecdote. I didn't go to Rexis myself, but the folks who attended Rexis told me that when the Best Paper Award was handed out to our paper on causal embeddings for recommendation, the feedback that was given by the committee was that, hey, these sorts of problems that you get to see in industry is not necessarily seen in academia. We sort of work with a very fixed data set and we make certain assumptions. Now, it's in the industry that we are able to see a lot more complicated challenges about the data set itself, of how some assumptions that we make on whether the data itself is biased or not can be questioned. And it is nice that companies like Criteo are able to publish on this. Again, I'm paraphrasing it, but it was a nice acknowledgement of why the research lab continues to publish papers about the work that we do. So pointer to our website out there. So given that it was not just about finding good machine learning problems. We also want to do that while engaging super actively with the local machine learning communities in all of our locations. Till date, Criteo has funded close to 16 faculty members, both in Europe and in the US, close to $500,000 pretty much. This is an unrestricted gift where we pretty much give the money to our faculty recipients to go ahead and use that to hopefully support a grad student. They could even go on vacation. It's not that we are going to ask them as to what they did with the money, but the point is that they would be able to support a grad student in their field of research. So that's something that we have done. And another thing that we are particularly proud of is we release data sets. Very few companies actually release advertising data sets. Advertising is the bread and butter of what Criteo does. And we have released 8 data sets to date, most of which are talking about the problems that are very, very relevant to the field of online advertising. I touched upon some of it. How do you model conversions? How do you take care of attribution? How do you take care of incrementality, which is the uplift modeling data set, and so on and so forth. We still hold the record for having released the largest ever public data set at 1 terabyte and 1 billion examples. So much so that our friends in Google have used to benchmark their cloud solutions on the data set. IBM has done that of late, along with NVIDIA in partnership. I've seen slides where Amazon and the latest to join that bandwagon was Zillow, where the CTR terabyte data set from Criteo is literally used to benchmark a whole bunch of deep learning solutions. Okay? Another thing which I hope some of you in this room are familiar with is the Machine Learning in the Real World workshop. 2018 was our 4th edition of it. It started out as being a very local conference where we invited mostly people based out of France. But of late, we have expanded the program to invite a lot of international speakers to come here. This is a free conference. For those of you who are not aware of it, I hope this is something you file away in your mind and attend the next edition of it. It is to speak about how machine learning is applied in the real world. And that's the impetus for the whole workshop, and to sort of share and network among the community who's interested in that field. So that's something that I'd like to highlight. Okay, besides this, the Criteo research team has also done a whole bunch to support the local ML community. We currently have 4 PhDs, one of whom is going to graduate very soon, who's hopefully graduation party we hope to crash. We want to continue investing in this particular endeavor. For us, our philosophy is to have a deep connection with an academician through the PhD student, as opposed to going through some sort of an intermediate organization. So funding PhDs is something that is core to us, and we want to continue investing in that. Another thing that I'm particularly proud of is, as far as I know, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, Criteo was one of the first companies to allow a part-time position, meaning we are not requiring any of our part-time people to give up their job teaching. You can hold your university position. In fact, we want you to go back, teach your students, continue to advise them. It's a part of what you do. And we believe in giving back to the community, and we intend to keep it that way. Of course, internships is something that we do as well. And another thing that I'm proud of is that the full-time researchers, I'm not talking about the part-time faculty, also participate in a whole bunch of local seminars. And it's 10 plus of these, where we are teaching in many, many different schools in Grenoble Alpes, in Marseille, in Lille, in Paris, in Leipzig, and so on and so forth. So we are trying to engage quite a lot with the local machine learning community to make sure that we are giving back where we sometimes take from. So what changed with the announcement of the AI lab? This was announced in 2018, and the big change for us is from being a research team, we literally became central to Criteo's strategy, where the idea was that we wanted to team up the research team with engineering firepower to basically enable 3 things. We wanted to make sure that the good ideas that our researchers had was able to be, that they should be able to experiment with it at scale. Now, what is a fast path to get some of these ideas tested out? So that's the first one. And the second one, deep learning is, of course, a very hot field. Lots of different domains have seen good gains from it. Now, the question for us is that the latency that we are interested in, 10 milliseconds to make a prediction, to decide if we want to place a bid or not, 100 milliseconds to figure out what is the look and feel of a banner along with the products that we want to show in it. Can deep learning models even be used in these sorts of contexts? Can they be predictable in some sense? So we want to invest quite a bit of effort in understanding this domain before we deploy it at scale. And finally, the thing that most stands out for me is now that we have engineering firepower in the organization, we are not just about publishing papers, but we are also open sourcing software. And the first thing that stands out is since June 2018, literally 3 months, we've managed to put out 3 good pieces of software. The first one is Tensorflow Yarn. For those of you who want to deploy TensorFlow at scale for training, if you try to get it running out of the box, you will run into quite a bit of trouble. So we've done the hard work, figured out how to get TensorFlow working at scale in a Yarn environment. This is open sourced for right now. The other piece that I want to plug is the Spark RSVD, where we have released software which allows you to do an SVD decomposition of large matrices, close to 100 million rows and columns. So this is out as well. And finally, the last piece, which got quite a bit of excitement in the recommendation community, is we've released an OpenAI gym for reinforcement learning using online advertising as a use case. Okay, so I kind of want to reiterate that Criteo AI Lab in this current version continues to want to further along its mission of solving complex machine learning problems inspired by the world of computational advertising. Take a look at some of our papers and you would be able to understand why some things are kind of particular to the field of online advertising and requires novel solutions which haven't yet been thought about. And we want to do this by actively engaging with you guys, with the local machine learning community, of which today's event is another outstanding example. I know I'm kind of standing between you and the main event, so I'm going to end with this and looking forward to seeing you all at future AI Lab events. Thank you.